Yeah, cost of living very much in the papers today, reflecting on Andy Burnham's first full day in charge. Burnham implores the Cabinet to find ways to tackle cost of living crisis. That's the front page of The Guardian. Plenty of reflection as well on some of the new policies being announced by the new Prime Minister. This, though, was one of his first.
We will help people to live well, building a more preventative state, investing in people's success, rather than paying for failure. And that work starts now. I will soon go through that door behind me and issue my first instruction to end rough sleeping in our country.
Yeah, Andy Burnham's pledge to end rough sleeping, but it's already faced criticism. It's been pointed out that rough sleeping actually increased while he was Mayor of Greater Manchester. So, is this a realistic target? Can we get people off the streets? Katie Dalton is the director of homelessness organisation Cymorth Cymru, joins us now. Very good morning to you, Katie. I guess the first thing to point out is that there's obviously differences between Wales and England in this because of housing, for example, is devolved.
Yes, absolutely. It's great to see the new Prime Minister prioritise homelessness, but we have to be clear that housing and homelessness policy is devolved here in Wales. And one of the other things that we would always look to when announcements like this are made is what is the money attached to it. And it appears that that's from in-year budget, so there will be no consequential for Wales, which is disappointing. I do think, however, that Westminster holds a number of levers that have an impact on how we're able to approach homelessness in Wales. We, of course, are able to set policy on housing and health and pass legislation, and we recently have done that with the Homelessness Act. But things like justice, refugee and asylum seeker policy and the welfare system are very firmly under the grip of the UK government. And a recent report by Crisis in Wales showed that LHA rates, which is the amount that housing benefit is capped for those looking for homes in the private rented market, the current rate would only allow 0.7% of the private rented market in Wales to be affordable for people on benefits. So I think what we hope is that his rhetoric on what stopped him being able to eradicate rough sleeping in Manchester leads to him dealing with some of those levers that are under the Westminster government. There are, as you say, differences in approach compared to England and Wales. We, for example, have a priority need category for people who are street homeless. So that means that in Wales, legally, there isn't any need for someone to be on the streets. That doesn't exist in England. So, you know, we would suggest he probably looks at some of the things we're doing in Wales to learn from.
Do you think that England will look to Wales on this?
Well, I think they absolutely should. I think that, you know, we certainly haven't solved homelessness. That's evident. However, there are a number of progressive policy and legislative developments that have happened in recent years, looking at some of the legal reform that we've made, as I say, specifically for people on the streets. Another thing that Andy Burnham has talked a lot about, both when he was Mayor of Manchester and also in the lead up to him becoming Prime Minister, is Housing First, which is a distinct model, an internationally proven model that helps people who have been homelessness for a long period of time, entrenched rough sleeping, people with complex needs. And that's something that we've taken a national approach towards in Wales. The previous Welsh Government and the current new Welsh Government have shown their backing for Housing First and have taken a national approach to scaling that up, whereas in England that's relied on the mayors to push that forward in places like Manchester and Liverpool. So I think there are things that can be learnt from our approach in Wales, but as I said, that's not to say that we've got everything solved. And, you know, our message to Andy Burnham was it would be you need to tackle some of those things like local housing allowance rates, issues with the move on time for refugees and asylum seekers, if we're to end homelessness in Wales. And we've got a new Welsh Government, so our message continues to be to them, you need to continue to prioritise homelessness. We're calling for a new Ending Homelessness Action Plan that can set us on that path towards ending homelessness in Wales.
I mean, look, it's a very good soundbite to start off when you're speaking on the steps of Downing Street. But as we've pointed out, it's easier said than done. And all this talk around where the funding is going to come from, is that then the message as far as you're concerned, is that make sure this is more than just, make sure these are not just empty words then, because it is going to be a tough fix.
It is, and it's very, very complex. You know, homelessness is not a choice. People just don't end up homelessness because they decided one day to be on the streets.
So do you think he's been naive then?
I mean, to be honest with you, having spoken to people in Manchester, I think he does understand the complexities, but he needs to follow this up with action. So, you know, there needs to be investment in both building social housing and in support systems systems in England, and we will happily receive those consequentials. For me, one of the key things he should do is increase local housing allowance rates at the very first instance, because that is a thing that is keeping in Wales 10,500 people in temporary accommodation because they simply can't afford the private rented sector. So action on funding, action on the welfare system, action to help refugees and asylum seekers to get the homes that they need, and action on justice to help people who are leaving the secure estate to avoid homelessness.
Plenty to do then. We shall
Indeed.
wait and see. Thank you very much, Katie Dalton of Cymorth Cymru. Right.